My name is Emma, and at 38, I'm about to share a story that completely reshaped everything I believed about family, responsibility, and love. Growing up, my family wasn't wealthy, but we managed. My mom had to retire early due to health issues, and my dad kept working, counting down the years until his own retirement, just two more to go. Then there was my younger sister, Evelyn, 13 years younger than me, and the undeniable favorite in our parents' eyes. By the time I graduated college, I had secured a stable job and moved in with my boyfriend, Henry. He was practical, logical, just like me, which is probably why we worked so well together. While Evelyn was still finishing her degree, I was already building my career and thinking ahead about our family's future. You don't have to keep sending them money, Henry would say whenever he saw me transferring funds into my parents' account. They're adults, too. I'd shake my head every time. They need the help, Henry. Their house is falling apart. I don't have kids, and this is my way of making sure they're okay. The house, that old, crumbling two-story place where I grew up, was becoming a serious concern. The walls had cracks, so deep you could see daylight through them. The roof leaked every time it rained, and the heating barely worked during winter. I finally hired a contractor to inspect it, hoping for some good news. Instead, I got a grim reality check. The contractor walked through each room, shaking his head. "Ma'am, fixing this place would cost more than just building new." He pointed out the water damage, the weak foundation, the structural risks. "You'd be throwing money away." That was the moment I made a decision that seemed completely logical at the time. I opened a joint savings account with my parents and came up with a plan. Save $210,000, combine it with whatever we could get from selling the old house, and buy them a safe, comfortable place for their retirement. Every month, I deposited a big chunk of my salary into that account. I watched the balance grow steadily, $60,000, then $110,000, each milestone bringing me closer to giving them the security they deserved. Henry and I lived modestly. No fancy vacations, no new cars. We even put off buying a house of our own. But I didn't mind, family came first, right? Then, everything changed on a seemingly ordinary Friday evening. We were gathered for family dinner, the comforting aroma of Mom's pot roast filling the air. Outside, the rain drummed lightly against the windows. It was one of those moments that felt warm, familiar, until Evelyn cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention. She was glowing, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Scott and I are getting married," she announced, holding up her left hand. A massive diamond ring caught the light, easily worth more than my entire annual salary. Mom gasped and jumped from her seat, hugging Evelyn tightly. Dad grinned with pride. And me? I sat there, staring at that ring, feeling something inside me shift. Something that had been buried under years of responsibility, sacrifice, and devotion to my family. Because in that moment I realized, maybe I had been wrong all along. I was happy for Evelyn, truly happy. Scott was a good guy from a nice family, and he treated her well. They seemed perfect together. But then, she dropped a bombshell that changed everything. "I've planned it all out," Evelyn said excitedly, pulling out her phone. She showed us a Pinterest board filled with fancy wedding ideas. The venue, the flowers, the dress, everything. "It'll cost about $380,000. I choked on my water. $380,000? I repeated, sure I had heard wrong. "Evelyn, that's crazy." The room went silent. Mom and Dad exchanged awkward glances. Evelyn just looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, like she expected this, like it was only fair. "Scott offered to do something smaller," she said, waving her hand like it didn't matter. "Just family and close friends. But I told him I could handle the cost myself. I want his family to see that we're just as good as they are." I stared at her. "And how exactly do you plan to pay for this?" She smiled sweetly. "You're going to help me, of course. You've always helped family." The silence was deafening. I turned to Mom and Dad, expecting them to say something, to tell Evelyn she was being ridiculous. But Mom just stared at her plate, and Dad suddenly found his coffee very interesting. I took a deep breath. I can give you $30,000 for the wedding, I said carefully, and another $20,000 as a gift. That's already a lot, Evelyn. Her smile disappeared. Her face darkened. That's not enough, she snapped. Emma, you have way more than that. This is my one chance to have my dream wedding, to show Scott's family that I'm not some poor girl they can look down on. I turned to our parents, frustration and desperation creeping into my voice. Mom, Dad, please tell her this is crazy. Tell her she doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Mom hesitated, then sighed. Maybe Evelyn has a point, honey. We couldn't give her much growing up. She deserves to have her special day. It felt like a punch to my stomach. Evelyn smirked. You're just jealous. Jealous. I repeated, stunned. Jealous that I'm getting married first. Jealous that Scott's family has money. Jealous that I get to have the wedding you never could. I clenched my jaw. I could have a big wedding if I wanted to, Evelyn. But unlike you, and just like that, everything between us changed. I understand the value of money. When Henry and I get married, we'll have a small wedding and save our money for things that really matter, like having kids and building a future. Evelyn's face turned red with anger. She stood up and snapped. God, you're so full of yourself. Always acting like you know everything. You're just greedy and selfish. I grabbed my purse, my eyes burning with tears. I'm greedy, I shot back. I've been giving half my salary to help Mom and Dad, while you've been busy planning how to spend money that isn't even yours. I stormed out into the rain, hearing Mom call after me, but I didn't look back. I drove home in a daze, trying to tell myself this was just a bad fight, that Evelyn would come to her senses once she calmed down. But I was wrong. 3 weeks after that awful dinner, I was at my desk during lunch break, going over my budget. Henry and I had dinner plans after work, and I wanted to make sure I had enough set aside after making my usual deposit into my parents' account. I logged into my online banking, clicked on the joint account, and felt my heart stop. The balance was $1. My hands shook as I clicked on the transaction history. There it was. A single withdrawal of $160,000 made just 4 days ago. I left work without even explaining to my boss. I could barely think as I drove to my parents' house. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. There had to be another explanation. Something other than what I feared. When I pulled into the driveway, both of their cars were there. I didn't bother knocking. I used my old key and pushed the door open. They were in the kitchen. Where's the money? I demanded, my voice shaking. Mom flinched. Dad wouldn't look at me. What happened to the $160,000 in the account? Mom's eyes stayed on the floor. Dad stared at his coffee cup, just like at dinner 3 weeks ago. We don't know what you're talking about, honey, Mom said softly. Don't lie to me, I shouted, pulling out my phone. The money was taken 4 days ago. All of it. If you didn't do it, then I'm calling the police. Mom gasped and reached for my phone. No, she said quickly. Don't call the police. I took it, Mom admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn needed it for the wedding. She's marrying into a good family. We couldn't let her have a small wedding. What would they think? I let out a short, bitter laugh. What would they think? They'd think she's marrying their son because she loves him, not because she's trying to impress them with my money. Mom reached out, trying to calm me down. It's going to be fine. Evelyn promised she'll help us buy a new house after the wedding. Once she's married to Scott, they'll have plenty of money. She already said she'll send us money every month. I stared at her, shocked. Are you even listening to yourselves? We had $160,000 saved for a new house. We only needed $60,000 more, and you could have finally moved out of this place before it collapses. Instead, you gave it all away for a party. A one-day event. It's not just a party, Dad argued. It's an investment in Evelyn's future. You don't understand. Once she's married to Scott. I looked around the kitchen, taking in the cracked walls, the sagging ceiling, the water stains in the corners. All things that could have been fixed. But now they would never be fixed. Because my parents chose a fantasy over reality. You know what? I said, suddenly feeling exhausted. You're right. I don't understand. And I don't want to understand. You made your choice. Now you can live with it. That night, I barely slept. Henry held me while I cried, then helped me make a plan. First thing in the morning, I closed the joint account and opened a new one in my name only. Then, I called Evelyn. She picked up after the fifth ring, sounding annoyingly cheerful. Oh, hi, Emma. I was just looking at wedding venues. There's this amazing place. Cut the crap, Evelyn. I interrupted. I know what you did. I know about the money. There was a brief silence. Then, her voice turned cold. If Mom and Dad gave me the money, that's their decision. You're not in charge of them. Give it back, I said through gritted teeth. Give it back now, or I swear to God, Evelyn. Or what? She snapped. You'll call the police? Go ahead. Mom withdrew it legally, so there's nothing you can do. Honestly, Emma, you should be happy for me. This is my dream wedding. I could barely believe what I was hearing. Your dream wedding? I spat. What about Mom and Dad's dream of having a safe home?
Did you even think about that?
Evelyn scoffed. Oh, please. They'll be fine. Once I'm married to Scott, I'll buy them whatever they need. His family has connections. We can probably get them a house for way less than market value. And in that moment, I realized Evelyn had never cared about anyone but herself. I let out a bitter laugh. You really believe that, don't you? That marrying into money will magically solve all your problems? There was silence on the other end of the phone. What did you tell Scott about where this money came from? I asked. She didn't answer. He doesn't know, does he? I pressed. You told him you had the money. Does he have any idea you stole it from our parents' house fund? I didn't steal anything, Evelyn shouted. You know what? Don't come to the wedding. I don't want you there anyway. You'd probably just try to ruin it with your jealousy and your I'm better than everyone attitude. Her words were full of hate, but I barely reacted. I thought about everything I had done for her, the college textbooks I bought, the rent I helped her pay when she was between jobs, all the little things she had clearly forgotten. You know what the difference is between us, Evelyn? I said quietly. I don't need a $380,000 wedding to prove my worth. And when I get married, I'll be able to look my husband in the eye knowing I never lied to him about money. She scoffed. Whatever. I have a meeting with the florist. Don't call me again. Then she hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. My mind kept going back to all the times I defended Evelyn to Henry when he said she was spoiled, all the times I made excuses for her, thinking she was just young and would grow out of it. Henry found me sitting there when he came home from work. Did you talk to her? He asked gently. I nodded. She spent it all. Deposits and bookings that can't be refunded. And your parents? They still believe she'll take care of them after the wedding, I said, laughing dryly. But it wasn't really a laugh, it was closer to a sob. They really think she'll buy them a house once she's married to Scott. Henry sat next to me. What do you want to do? Nothing, I said, surprising myself with how calm I felt. There's nothing to do. They made their choice. All three of them. Now they get to live with it. In the months after that fight, I focused on my own life. I threw myself into work and into planning a future with Henry. We found a small but beautiful house we loved and started saving for a down payment. I heard about Evelyn's wedding plans from Aunt Madison, Mom's sister, who still talked to both sides of our now broken family. You wouldn't believe how over the top this wedding is, Aunt Madison told me over coffee one afternoon. The dress alone cost $40,000. She's having doves released during the ceremony. And the cake? 5 tiers, covered in real gold leaf. I just shook my head, unable to say a word. 1 week before Evelyn's wedding, I realized I felt nothing anymore. I got an unexpected visitor at work, Scott, my soon-to-be brother-in-law. He stood by my desk, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit. Can we talk? He asked hesitantly. I just found out about the money, where it really came from. My heart skipped a beat. My parents' accountant was helping us review our finances before the wedding, he explained. He noticed some big deposits in Evelyn's account and asked where they came from. She broke down and told me everything. I leaned back in my chair, waiting. I had no idea, he admitted, shaking his head. She told me she had been saving for years for her dream wedding. I offered to have a smaller celebration, but she insisted she could afford it. If I had known she took your parents' house money. His voice trailed off. As he left my office, I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't quite understand. A part of me wanted to warn him about what he was getting into, that Evelyn had been spoiled and selfish since childhood. But another part of me knew that he had to make his own choices. The day of Evelyn's wedding arrived. It was a perfect, sunny Monday in July. I didn't go, but later, I saw the pictures on social media. The release of white doves, the horse-drawn carriage, the champagne fountain, the fireworks display. Everything was exactly as Evelyn had dreamed. Paid for with money that should have given our parents a safe home. That night, I lay awake, thinking about my parents. Sitting at that lavish wedding, surrounded by wealth and luxury, knowing they would go home to a house that was literally falling apart. 7 months after the wedding, my phone rang. It was my parents' number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Emma, Mom's voice was small, tired. Everything's bad here, the house, it's getting worse. I stayed silent, waiting. A pipe burst in the upstairs bathroom last week. We can't afford to fix it properly. Your father had to shut off the water to that whole floor. I clenched my jaw. We tried calling Evelyn, she continued. She promised she'd help us after the wedding, but now she says they're having money problems. Something about Scott's family's business having a bad quarter. I took a deep breath. What do you want from me, Mom? Asked, keeping my voice calm. She hesitated. Then, in a small, broken voice, she said, "We made a mistake. We know that now." She sighed shakily. "A piece of plaster fell on your father's head. He had to get 2 stitches. The doctor said we were lucky it wasn't worse." I closed my eyes, remembering the contractor's warnings from 3 years ago. "Have you tried calling Evelyn again?" I asked. Mom let out a bitter laugh. "She and Scott are barely speaking. They came back from their honeymoon fighting about money. Apparently, she maxed out their joint credit cards in the Maldives." I blinked. "What?" "Scott's parents got involved," Mom continued. "And, well, it's not good." I took a deep breath. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. And, to my surprise, I actually meant it. I really meant it. Not because I felt sorry for Evelyn, but because our parents had given up their future for her fairy tale. And now, even that was falling apart. Could you maybe help us?" Mom's voice cracked. "Just with a pipe? We can't use the upstairs bathroom at all. Your father's back is hurting from going up and down the stairs at night to use the downstairs one." I thought about the house Henry and I were saving for. About our wedding plans. "I can't, Mom," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not in a position to help anymore. You need to talk to Evelyn." After I hung up, I called Aunt Madison. She told me what Mom hadn't. Evelyn and Scott were living in a luxury apartment, a wedding gift from his parents. But their marriage was already falling apart. Scott had found out that Evelyn had taken out several personal loans to cover more wedding expenses, on top of the money she had stolen from our parents. Meanwhile, Dad was still working even though he should have retired, and Mom had started looking for part-time work. The entire upper floor of their house had been closed off due to water damage and mold. "Your father's too proud to ask for help," Aunt Madison told me. "But, Emma, that house is becoming dangerous. The water damage is spreading. They either fix it or move out, but they can't afford either." I remembered standing in that house 3 years ago, making plans with the contractors to help my parents move somewhere safe. If only they had waited. If only they had trusted me instead of believing Evelyn's empty promises. That evening, Henry found me sitting in our home office, looking at old pictures of my parents' house, before all of this happened. "You're thinking about helping them, aren't you?" he asked. "No," I said firmly. "I can't. Even if I wanted to, we need our savings for our home." "I won't set myself on fire to keep them warm," I added, my voice steady. "Especially after what they did." Henry watched me for a moment. "But it's killing you to see them suffer," he said softly. I turned to him, tears in my eyes. Of course it is. They're my parents. But they chose this. They chose Evelyn's one-day fantasy over their own future. They chose to believe her lies instead of accepting my real help. And now they have to live with those choices. That night, I dreamed about the old house. In my dream, I was a child again, sitting in my bedroom, listening to the rain tapping against the window. But when I looked up, the ceiling was cracking. Water was dripping down. And no matter how many buckets I put out, it just kept coming. I couldn't catch all the drops. 3 years after Evelyn's wedding, Aunt Madison called me at work. Her voice was tense. "Evelyn and Scott are getting divorced," she said without any small talk. I felt a dull sense of inevitability. "She's moving back in with your parents," Aunt Madison continued. The final straw was when Scott found out she had been hiding mail, credit card bills, overdue notices. She had been secretly using their joint credit cards for months, even after he cut her off. His parents got involved. And well, the prenup is being enforced. So she gets nothing. Less than nothing, Aunt Madison corrected. She's got $60,000 in personal debt from the wedding loans, plus all the credit card debt she racked up trying to keep up appearances. Scott's family is done with her. They want nothing to do with her anymore. I thought about that $380,000 wedding. The doves. The gold leaf cake. The fireworks. All that money, my parents' future, burned up in smoke for a marriage that barely lasted 3 years. I closed my eyes, remembering what the contractor told me 4 years ago. If we had stuck to the original plan, my parents would be in a new house right now. Instead, they were in their 60s, working themselves to exhaustion, still living in half a condemned house, and now taking in their unemployed, broke daughter. That evening, I drove past my parents' house. I didn't stop. I just looked. Evelyn's luxury car, the one she clearly couldn't afford anymore, was already parked in the driveway. Through the windows, I saw the lights on, shadows moving inside. Evelyn was back in our childhood home, but not in the way any of us had imagined. The next day, I ran into Evelyn at the grocery store where Mom worked. She looked different. The designer clothes and perfect nails were gone. Now, she wore faded jeans, and her nails were chipped. She saw me, but instead of saying anything, she turned away, pushing her cart down another aisle. Today, I'm getting married. As I stand in front of the mirror, adjusting my simple white dress, nothing like Evelyn's $40,000 designer gown, I think about how different our paths have been. Henry and I are having a courthouse wedding with only Aunt Madison and his immediate family there. Afterward, we'll have dinner at our favorite restaurant. The entire wedding will cost less than what Evelyn spent on her flowers alone. Are you sure you don't want to invite them? Henry asked me last night, meaning my parents and Evelyn. I shook my head. They made their choice 4 years ago. I looked him in the eye and smiled. Now, I'm making mine. The update from Aunt Madison was not good. The house was officially condemned last month. My parents had to move into a small, 3-bedroom apartment with Evelyn, using what little savings they had left for the security deposit. Mom still works at the grocery store. Dad finally had to retire. His health wouldn't let him keep going. And Evelyn? She's working as a waitress, trying to pay off her huge debt. Your mother asks about you, Aunt Madison told me recently. She keeps the announcement of your courthouse wedding on her nightstand. I had sent the announcement through Aunt Madison, not directly to them. It wasn't an invitation, just a notice that I was getting married. Mom had tried to call after she got it, but I let it go to voicemail. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. They understand now, Aunt Madison said. They know they made a terrible mistake. Your father says it's the biggest regret of his life, choosing one daughter's fantasy over the other daughter's reality. But understanding doesn't change anything. It doesn't bring back the $160,000 they gave away. It doesn't fix their condemned house. It doesn't erase the fact that they betrayed my trust in the worst possible way. Evelyn is still living with them, working double shifts just to make minimum payments on her wedding debt. The luxury apartment?
Gone.
The designer clothes?
Gone.
The expensive car?
Gone.
Sometimes, She posts on social media about learning life lessons and the true meaning of family. But I've muted her accounts. Her words feel empty after everything that happened. Yesterday, a package arrived from my parents. A wedding gift. I almost sent it back without opening it. But curiosity got the better of me. Inside was Mom's old pearl necklace, the only valuable thing she had left. With it was a note. "We should have trusted you. We should have seen who you really were. The responsible one. The caring one. The one who tried to give us a real future, not just a one-day dream. We're so sorry. We love you." I closed the box. Maybe one day, I'll wear the necklace. But not today. Today, I'm wearing the simple silver pendant Henry gave me on our first anniversary. It's not expensive. It's not flashy. But it's real. Like our love. Like our plans. Like our future. After the ceremony, Henry and I will go home, to the house we finally saved enough to buy. It's nothing fancy. A modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, but it's ours. Built on careful planning and honest work. Not dreams and schemes. "Ready?" Henry asks, poking his head into the room. I take one last look in the mirror. And smile. "Yeah," I say. "I'm ready." I take one last look in the mirror. My dress is simple. My makeup is light. My flowers were picked up from the local florist this morning. Nothing like Evelyns' over-the-top wedding. But I'm marrying a man I love, surrounded by people I trust. Starting a life based on reality, not fantasy. "Ready," I say. And this time, I truly mean it. As we drive to the courthouse, I think about everything I've learned. I've learned that some people will take everything from you if you let them. That parents can love their children too much in all the wrong ways. That one bad choice can destroy decades of trust and hard work. But I've also learned about strength. My own strength. I've learned how to set boundaries. How to choose reality over fantasy. How to build a life on solid ground, not on shifting sand.